Welcome to Something Positive for Positive People. I'm Courtney Brame. Something Positive for Positive People is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that serves people living with herpes. If you're someone who's struggling with herpes stigma and want to be connected to any resources such as mental health resources, counseling, therapy, or just need to be connected to community, then please don't hesitate to reach out. You can find me on social media at H on my chest. I am most active on Instagram. It's really easy to engage with people there. Or you can email me at Courtney@SPFPP.org. If you're someone who's benefited from the services of Something Positive for Positive People, if you found this podcast to be of use to you or someone you know, please don't hesitate to consider making a donation to Something Positive for Positive People. You can do so on the website at www.spfpp.org. My Venmo, Cash App are just Courtney Brame, my first and last name. All one word, no spaces, no special characters, and just put donation in the caption and I'll know what it's for. All right, today's podcast episode, we're probably going to need all 59 minutes and 59 seconds to talk about the topic that I want to bring up today. This is a solo episode, and it doesn't have anything to do with herpes, to be honest. I also forgot to say, if you haven't already left a review, please consider leaving a review as well. That really helps us with getting people to find these resources, okay? Now, I don't know where to really start with this. So I've drawn a diagram in my journal that I'll hopefully have it for the artwork of this podcast episode, because I think that it very well describes something that perhaps other people may be facing with their identities. At the top of the triangle, if you can picture this in your mind with me, there is cis heterosexual man. And on the lower right angle of the triangle, there's black. And then on the lower left portion of the triangle, there's queer. And these are three identifiers for spaces that I occupy. Based on my skin color, obviously, I'm black. Based on my presentation of my beard, my stature, the way that I do relationships, I'm straight. And then my advocacy, my passion, my friendships, my relationships are often, like, you'll see me engaging with queer content or queer people, queer spaces. So as someone who is a cisgendered, heterosexual, black man who occupies queer spaces, I am going to go out on the limb and say that there are not very many people in a public space or easily visible that have these overlapping, externally projected identities. Now, I want you to try and keep up with me here as I go through and explain this. Hopefully the diagram is more put together than what I'm trying to say here. But in this picture of the triangle, again, cisgendered, heterosexual man at the top, bottom right, black, bottom left, queer, is a triangle. Now, the circle in the middle of that triangle has a huge question mark there. And the question mark is symbolic of how do you integrate these things? How do you shrink down those triangles that are separate of three identities? How do you make that one? So I spent some time over the last few days trying to figure out how to bring these three identities that challenge one another together, because my blackness challenges my queerness challenges my cis heterosexual manliness, and that challenges my blackness as well. So there's this triangle that has this reciprocal challenging that goes on just by default. So the way that this may show up is like in black communities. I do a lot of things that aren't black people shit. So like queerness is an expression of what we would consider to be, black people don't do that. Black people don't do non-monogamy. Black people don't talk about real shit, talk about their feelings out there publicly, because people may use that against you. And that there's a little bit of overlap between what it means to be black as well as what it means to be a cisgendered heterosexual man to some extent, and that expression of vulnerability. So like, I consider masculinity healthily, like natural organic masculinity has the integration of femininity in it as well. So when I say cisgendered heterosexual, let's use masculine instead. So we'll expand a little bit more, but I feel like masculinity is much more definitive than cisgendered heterosexual man. Like the masculine is drawn to the feminine, right? So typically it's man woman is how it's been traditionally upheld, and my being challenges that. Like with gender norms, I have already expressed on here that I've had a ton of financial insecurity, and to me that has conflicted with and has been something that I had to lean into and challenge for myself. Like, why do I have such a problem with or why am I so attached to my identification as someone who makes money, who is able to provide the luxuries that come with stable financial status, right? What does it mean when I don't have money? Am I less of a man? Or if I'm like waiting on my next paycheck? Or if I'm unable to spend the way that I want to spend? You know, like what does that mean for my identity? So having to challenge that alone, like I find myself in a position where, all right, I date women who do make a lot more money than me. I date women who don't want to cook and clean, who might not want to have kids, right? So what does this mean for my manliness? What does this mean for my masculinity? And challenging that, it doesn't mean anything. This is an identifier that is projected onto what it means, or I'm allowing for it to project onto me what it means to be a man, what it means to be masculine. Now let's take it over into black, right? As we look at what it means to be black, and we talk about like, I'm open about my herpes status. I don't know any other black men, at least, who are open about their herpes status, who are open about such vulnerabilities. Like it's very not normal for us to challenge or even speak about vulnerable things. Like that's not what we do. And, you know, even my grandfather, my dad, even, like, we don't talk about feelings. That's not what we supposed to do. And that's kind of the general overlap with being manly, masculine, and black, is that I directly challenge both of those with vulnerability. I talk about mental health. I talk about sexual health. I talk about my own shortcomings as someone who is marginalized for various overlapping identities, being a black man in America who occupies queer spaces. Like, all of these things stack on top of one another and make for like this compounded marginalized identity. So black masculinity, in that sense of the way that I do it, it's challenged because, again, masculinity is integrated with femininity. So I'm emotionally aware, I'm emotionally supportive, and the things that you look at masculinity and in like opposition to femininity, why can't you have both? Like, why does masculinity have to be the absence of femininity? And why does black have to be the absence of what white people shit and what it means to be queer? Which we can just go ahead and smooth transition over to the queer portion, because it was the way that I'm gonna define queer here as the conscious challenging of social norms, the dissolution of the status quo, essentially, like rejecting that. I hosted a podcast called Selfed during the time that Something Positive for Positive People was on hiatus. And during that time, I probably uploaded 35 podcast episodes, and I really got into like just self-reflecting on things. In one of the episodes, I was looking at what it meant to be queer, and that there's normal as like your baseline in the center, and then like on one side you have queer, and then on the other side you have crazy, right? So I think it was like crazy queer or something like that. But queer, by definition, in that case, not subscribing to normal, crazy as other people would project it onto someone as not being normal, but in an unconscious way. So I've looked at queerness as, all right, I'm consciously going into and accepting that I reject social norms. So I am consciously choosing to not be normal. That's queer. But when you're unaware that your actions are not normal, or people are projecting onto you, and you're rejecting the idea of being who you are, maybe that's what crazy is. So, like, in playing with that idea that crazy in the way that we use it is just not normal, but queer in the way that we use it is also not normal. One's just conscious, and the other one tends to be something that's more so like projected onto you. Like, you're just not, you're at conflict with who you are because it doesn't match up what it is that is normal. There's an acceptance in queerness, whereas there's an ongoing rejection of being different and being crazy, right? So on that episode, I don't know that I'll share those episodes. I removed it because I'm back here to something positive for positive people, and the solo episodes here do really well. And while I used to think that there wasn't a place for this dialogue on something positive for positive people, I've come to see that a lot of the solo episodes have been very well received, downloaded. I get feedback on those all the time. So thank you all for continuing to support, me just being real and coming in and talking about my experience as it relates, because I feel like, the herpes conversations are necessary, they're relevant, they're valid, but that's not exclusively what I want for people to be able to come here, get, and then take away. Like, I want people to understand, like, there is so much more to the world than just herpes. And for me, having herpes is something that sent me down this road of understanding my identities. That's why we're looking at this triangle here between masculinity, blackness, and queerness. And so as a straight man, I don't feel like I belong in queer spaces. And as the way that I date is queer, I feel like that doesn't fit into black spaces. And I want to share what sparked this conversation. I want to thank the person who reached out to me and pointed this out. So on one of my recent posts, I shared some screenshots of my dating profile, just to show how you can sort of disclose your herpes status or filter people who would be receptive to a conversation or dialogue around your herpes status, so that you're filtering in better, and you're kind of like easily, just putting it out there that you are someone who values your sexual health and you have a positive status. This person pointed out to me that in my description of my profile, what I shared, there was a phrase that said queer friendly. And in their questioning, they were like, I wouldn't swipe on you if I saw that. How would you feel if someone had black friendly? And I kind of like tilted my head a little bit at the response. I was like that's everywhere. Like Black Lives Matter, or BLM being in dating profiles. And what that says to me is that you're someone who is like, if I looked at you, I would see white woman, cisgendered white woman, right? That is what I would see on somebody that has BLM in their profile. If you don't have that, then how are you able to articulate to yourself, to me, that you are someone who is aware of social justice issues, who does date outside their race? I really don't have any identifiers. And if you were to look at me and not see queer friendly, you'd have whatever your perception is of a black person, of a heterosexual person. I can't tell you how many times like I've fixed my lips to say things to white people, older white people, and they don't expect for me to be able to communicate the way that I do. So being able to put out there in a way that says, hey, like, you're safe here, because there may be trauma for some people around men. There may be misconceptions or past judgments on someone who's dating black men. I can't tell you like how many, like even in relationships, the idea of what it means to date a black man is sometimes just ingrained in a person, and without knowing the right questions, without exchanging dialogue, like I got 2 or 3 pictures and that little bit of section on my profile to sell you on why you should swipe right on me. And it's very important to me that I put out there that I am queer friendly. Like I said, queer as a label doesn't fit well for me. While I may be queer in my politics, queer in dating, it doesn't fit as a heterosexual person. And I'll continue to go a little bit further into that because I'm sure if you're someone who listens to this podcast, one of the questions that you're likely asking is, well, who defines that for you? Like, who tells you you're black or not black enough? Who tells you you're queer or not queer enough? Who tells you you're a man or not man enough? There's no holy Bible of what it means to express an identity, but what there is this expectation from society of what it means. And I'm sitting here for the last few days and I've been like, my identities. Are these my identities, or are these social constructs that have been projected onto me and expectations that I've chosen to subscribe to, whether consciously or unconsciously? So as I navigate the conversation with this person, these are kinds of things that are coming up for me. One of the questions they asked me was, well, what does a queer person behave like? And in my head, I default to like dressing in rainbows, being open to having sex with people of other genders, identities, orientations. Like the words, I don't want to use the wrong word, so I just used all of them there. And it hit me because I'm like, I wouldn't challenge your queerness. Why would you challenge my straightness, right? This was a thought that occurred. Like, I like what I like, you like what you like, and whatever opportunities have come to explore that. Like, I know that I don't have an attraction to male identifying people, men identifying people. Like, listen, I choke and gag on bananas and brushing my teeth. I can't suck a dick. Like, let's just put that out there right now. Like, I know that, and I'm not really keen to like masculine voices. I'm not keen to like facial hair. Like, I'm attracted to what it is that I'm attracted to. And energetically, whenever the conversations get there, I do consider myself to be demisexual. Mostly demisexual. When there's emotional connection, emotional safety, I'm there. I'm all for it. I'm all in it. And those are the strongest connections that I have. And that's what I'm drawn to at an energetic level. But like physically, I have the attraction to more of what's, I guess, deemed feminine, if you will. And so, yeah, like I like what I like, and that's that. So challenging my sexuality or just like being on board with the politics of my dick. Like, I have to obey the politics of what makes my dick hard. And I got that from David Wraith, who's in St. Louis. Shout out to David Wraith for putting that terminology out there. But I think I also heard him say this phrase, hetero queer, because he's queer in his politics. And I was like, damn, I really like that. But even then, here's another label that I'm creating. And I believe that labels are attached to expectations and they don't belong to people. Labels and expectations don't belong to people. They belong to things. They belong to places. Like, I expect when I go to a desert that it's going to be dry. So it's a desert. You know what I mean? That's probably a poor example, but institution-wise, looking at what it means to be a trauma-informed, which is a label, organization, you should expect to go in there and have trauma-informed treatment by all employees. And if that expectation isn't met, you should be able to speak up and say something. But it's assumed that whether a person's black or white, whether they're straight, queer, you're going to get trauma-informed care as a label. So black as a label, right? When you see black, like, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to me? What does that mean to a black person from another country or from another like state? I'm from the Midwest. I live in the Pacific Northwest. Someone who's black in the South versus someone who's black on the East Coast, we might have varying definitions of what being black looks like. Same thing for being a man. Because like, I'm out here now, and like I said, like, I'm used to opening doors for partners. I'm used to paying for dinner, and like, all that shit went out the window. So my idea of what it means to be a man, what it means to be heterosexual, what it means to be queer, what it means to be black, all of these things have been challenged since stepping outside of my, let's call it, comfort zone, since exploring my own identities. Like, these have all been things that have ongoingly been challenged. So in this person, asking me about what it means to be queer friendly, I had to ask myself, damn, okay, well, what does that mean? And me presenting as, I'm 6 foot, I'm about 250 pounds, and I'm a black man. And I have facial hair, I'm fairly muscular, so I have this stature of being, potentially intimidating. So I have to consciously make myself less threatening. So queer friendly is a way of making myself less threatening digitally. I walk by people on the streets and I smile, or I say, hey, good morning, good afternoon. I don't always want to fucking speak to people to make myself seem non-threatening, to keep somebody from walking across the street or clutching their purse tighter. Like, this is shit that I am aware of, and I've had to just incorporate into my identities as someone who looks the way that I do. Like, I have to create a sense of safety for people around me, and the best way to do that is to be non-threatening. Now we got to wear masks, like, all the time. So how can I come off as non-threatening with a mask on in public? Like, now I gotta, good morning, even louder. Hey, how's it going? Even louder, right? Whereas before I could just smile and people would be like, oh, okay, he's smiling. He must be one of those friendly ones. I'm sorry, that was unnecessary. I'm being petty. But yeah, so going back to the triangle, this idea of masculinity being excluding femininity, this idea of black excluding vulnerability, this idea of queer excluding straightness. The question mark that I have that connects all three of these is, how do I integrate these three identities? And as I started to do that, I wrote words in here. I wrote stigma, I wrote able-bodied, I wrote finances, I wrote privilege. And then finally I got to what the core of it is. I'm trying to condense these three angles of identities down into a sphere of a whole new identity that integrates these aspects of myself. And that's not even what it's about. It's not about bringing it together. It's not about adding things. It's about removing things, healing. As I heal, as I reflect, as I challenge these identities and these aspects of my life, I am trimming away the outlines of this triangle down into what this sphere is. This sphere isn't an integration of society's expectations. It's the chipping away of it. Think about a stone statue. Like, you just got a big ass piece of marble, and whatever the artists were back in the day that had a hammer and chisel, when they created the art that was, they didn't add anything. They removed what was already there to uncover the core of what that marble slab was, which was the stone statues, structures, the naked people, like, you know what I'm talking about, when, like, the bodies, the people that I'm thinking about Greece, like the Greek gods and things like that were made out of stone. That's what this process of healing is. Healing is chipping away at what doesn't work for you, those external societal expectations that are projected onto you that you feel like you have to subscribe to and call your identity. I challenge you to chip away at those. Like, what's your triangle of identities? What are three things that you identify with? You can look at your sexuality. You can look at your femininity or masculinity. You can look at your color. You can look at your financial status, social status. Like, take three identities that really sit with you and do the same thing. Like, in what ways do they conflict? In what ways don't you belong? Because I feel like I don't belong in a lot of the spaces I'm in. And maybe that's normal. Maybe we all at our core feel like we don't belong. And that's how we all should feel. We should all feel like outsiders in a way, because we do challenge social norms that aren't ours, like the beliefs that have been instilled in us by our families, our environments, our parents, our caregivers, our communities. Like, we were conditioned And these layers of, what is those identities have been added to us to the point where we don't even recognize our core of who we are, our core values, our core identity. And that's where this question mark is, that's in the center of this triangle of healing. Healing is being able to chip away and challenge those other angles, those outer angles of who you think you are. And when I get to the core of it, like I look at like that core is the disruption and challenge of the status quo, the challenging of and disruption of the status quo. This isn't a sphere in the middle. This is the core of who I am. That's one's identity because we are unique. No one has had the same collection of exact experiences that you have, that I have. Subscribing to this belief that who we are is contingent on how manly we can be, how much money we can make, how black we are, how cool we are, how queer we can be. Fuck that shit. If you want somebody to get to know you, then do what you got to do in order to get to know them or let them get to know you. Like, share space, be present, like have dialogue, be willing to welcome in people of various identities that they subscribe to, but like let's see one another. Let's create spaces that give people the opportunity to demonstrate their uniqueness. Just because I am in a queer space, doesn't mean that based on societal expectations, I have to have the same beliefs or expression that someone else may have. Just because I'm a cisgendered, heterosexual man doesn't mean that I subscribe to the traditional values of masculinity. Doesn't mean I'm, inherently aggressive or alpha. And just because I'm black don't mean I don't like white people shit. I love glass animals. That's probably, not to say that's the whitest shit that I've done. I love Beat Saber. Right? And I also, I date non-monogamously, and this is something that challenges social norms, and that's a big part of my life. The way that I date, the way that I do politics, the way that I navigate my passions. The communities that I spend the bulk of my time in are primarily queer spaces. This is not about the integration of multiple identities. It's not about subscribing to identities. And labels do a great job of being out there in order for people to find community and see where they belong. But I still believe that they should be applied to institutions. They should be applied to systems so that people know that they can get the resources, care, community, support that they need from these organizations. And the people there ought to be drawn there because they are accepting of what those identifiers mean. But your identity isn't what you think your identity is. It's not adding to, it's stripping away from till you get to your core. And the way to get to our core is by healing, by reflecting. This is just a journal prompt. I drew this triangle because of a conversation that I had. And if we're not willing to welcome in conversations with people of various lifestyles who don't live like us, act like us, or even are from the same places as us, then how do we evolve? How do we expand? How do we live? I'm grateful at this point for the experiences that have come after my herpes diagnosis, because I wouldn't have met the people who introduced me to what it means to challenge the status quo, to challenge the social norms that have just been given to me. I didn't subscribe to this shit. I didn't ask for it. It was just there. I'm 33 years old now, and I remember when I was 20, I wanted to be married and be on my way to having 5 kids, because I'm one of 5. And now, I'm 33. I done made it past that point, and after doing all this challenging, it's more important to me that I do this work, that I encourage and inspire others to, do this work within themselves if they choose to, If you do want 5 kids, yay, go for you. Good for you. If you don't, yay, good for you too. Like, it's okay for you to want what it is that you want. And you might not feel like you belong where you are. You might not feel like you fit in where you are. And I want you to know that that is okay. Like, transcending this duality of belonging or not belonging, you should just be able to be. I had to look down at the timer. I know we only got 59 minutes, but it's only been 30 now. I'm very surprised with myself. I'm pleased with having been able to do this. But the inner conflict is actually more so of an outer conflict. We have this conflict between our core of who we are, our beliefs, our real beliefs, and then the external reminders that who we might believe ourselves to be is wrong. And that's not cool. That's not fair. Because what's right is for you to be able to challenge what it is that doesn't sit right for you. And in my experience, like, that's what a lot of the queer communities and people, friends that I've made have been a part of, is this challenging their sexuality, challenging the things projected onto them that they just may not agree with, and being brave enough to say, no, that doesn't actually sit well with me. I'm going to go a different route, and I'm going to find that route on my own. Like, that bravery is admirable, because it's not easy and it's isolating. It can be lonely to know that you don't fit in somewhere and then walk away from where you don't fit in to figure out where you do. And in that wandering and that self-reflection and the challenging of beliefs with behaviors, that's how we get into recognizing who we are at our core. And when you recognize that, you realize, oh, there is nobody like me. I am me. Because when I drew this, I was looking for role models. I don't fucking have one. All my role models are animated characters. And Childish Gambino. And Stan Lee, who's dead. But, like, other than that, I don't know that there's representation of cisgendered, heterosexual black men who date queer. And someone, same person, pointed out to me, they were like, when you say queer friendly, I just think that you only fuck cis women who fuck cis women. And that's never even crossed my mind. Because I still ain't had a successful threesome. So that doesn't to me mean anything. When I think queer friendly, I think, all right, I'm able to have these kinds of conversations. I think sex positivity. I think body positivity. I think social justice. I think activism. I think the rejection of things as they are. So that is my way of filtering similar wavelengths, even if I'm not doing queer acts, whatever the fuck that would mean to someone. The energy is there. The energy and the willingness to resist the status quo, to come up with my own path of being. So this is me putting myself out there, not necessarily as that role model, but like as that mirror of, or for anyone who might be in a similar boat. You don't have to be black, you don't have to be masculine, you don't have to be queer to have 3 main identifiers that resonate with you in your identity or identities, and challenge those. Like, how do these support one another? How do they conflict with one another? What I did was I took 3 things about myself on the surface that I know to be true, and I know that they conflict with one another. I am vulnerable. I have no problem stepping into my masculinity when I need to, or my femininity when I need to. I have no problem with stepping into my variations, my various blackness, whatever the fuck that means, because a lot of it is like conditioned for survival, like me now having to be non-threatening, but I'm also ethnic and hip and I'm cool and I got swag and culture. Like, there's all this to it. And then there's the whole, like, how as a black person I show up sexually, that misconception, conception, perception is the word I meant to say. But, like, you don't notice unless you communicate. And using queer friendly was a way of communicating that. Wow. Okay, I hope y'all didn't hear that. Somebody just drove by with their music hella loud. But yeah, I feel good about where this is. I guess I didn't need the entire 59 minutes and 59 seconds to make my point. But I'm curious to know what your feedback is, if you have any. If you listen to this podcast episode, you'll know that it's different than other podcast episodes that have been done. Herpes has only come up, just as something that sent me down this path. And of course, you know that the nonprofit organization is supporting people with herpes. We serve people with herpes. I reached out to my board members, and this will be where I want to close up here on the podcast as a whole. But I've been listening to this book. I mentioned this in an earlier episode called Forces for Good, and this is about nonprofit organizations, the top 12 nonprofits in the United States that do 6 things well. I can't tell you what 1 through 5 are, but I remember being like, yeah, we're doing that. And then when it got to 6, I was so disappointed and heartbroken that number 6 is something that I can't ask of people to inspire advocacy from within the community. And so I looked at my board, and a lot of my board members in the past have not been, like, they've had my back, but I need them to have my side. I need them to be with me in my activism. And I recognize in hindsight, like, I have tried to make this shift into exclusively mental health and speaking about STIs more rather than herpes as like a smokescreen to protect my board members, the ones who did have herpes, in the event that they were found out, if you will, and by association with this organization, potentially facing some sort of stigma. And even in relationships, like I've allowed partners to have me in this like internalized stigma state, to where we'd be at like family dinners or something, and a relative would ask me how my day was, and I know that my partner's not really okay with me talking about herpes, so I'll just say, oh, I woke up, trained people, and it was good. Rather than being like, man, I someone who was in therapy hit me up, we talked, and they told me how grateful they were for the support of a therapist who understands what it means to have herpes, and support this person in disclosing their status and having a meaningful relationship and getting out of an abusive relationship and not killing themselves, putting down those pills or putting that gun away. Like, these are conversations I have on a regular basis, and it's like, damn, dude, I can't tell my partner's family, this person who's so important to me, like, I have to hide those kinds of things. And that was extended into my reflection of my board members. And I need for my board to be next to me, not behind me, but supportive in a more hands-on role. And it's my fault because I've not wanted to bother anybody or be too much of an inconvenience with them. So I haven't asked for anything. I haven't asked for much, but now it's at the point where I recognize that my quietness about what it is that something positive for positive people is, which is a resource that serves people living with herpes. Like, I need that advocacy, and I'm using my privilege to overcompensate for those who don't have it, for those who want to support, for those who want to have their voices heard but just can't. Like, that's what this podcast is. It's a safe space for people to come on, and I appreciate y'all's bravery, trusting me with your voice, trusting me with your identity, trusting me with your anonymity, to put it out there and your experience out there into the world for other people to feel supported. Like, that's where the advocacy comes from. And I kind of lost sight of that in reading this book, because I'm like, fuck, man, our success is going to be contingent on people's willingness to confront stigma in this way, that there are testimonies out there about how supportive and helpful something positive for positive people is. And that's not necessary. Like, I know what kind of fucking impact I have. And, part of this H on my chest thing, like, the H is hero. That's one of the things that the H stands for. And I feel like a hero in the sense of, Goku, Batman, Superman, they'll save people. And, they shouldn't have to have a person rave about, oh, Superman did the right thing. It should be expected to do the right thing. Like, that should be the standard. Let's put standards on doing the right thing. And this feels like the right thing. Like, I don't need the praise. I mean, it would help the organization if someone were like, hey, I was feeling like the stuff that I hear in DMs privately, to be able to, I put some of it out there, but I can't put everything out there. Like, I may not get consent from the person to do it. It may not feel right because it would feel like bragging. They may have their names in the posts or the conversations that are had, or just conversations, but I share what I can when I can. And part of being a hero is that sometimes being a hero is thankless. Sometimes I'll talk to somebody for weeks, for hours over the course of those weeks. And this might be a successful business person who just, for whatever reason, like take, and doesn't want to reciprocate with a donation or a testimonial or a podcast review or sharing the resource. And that's stigma. Like, all of that is just centered around the stigmatization of herpes. Like, I hands down serve the most stigmatized group of people. For people with HIV, there are all kinds of organizations out there that can offer a lot more than what I can. I can offer you a listening ear. I can offer you a podcast. I can offer you connection to community. That's it. That's all I got. We're not building homes. We're not putting people whose homes burned down into new homes. I'm not cleaning water. We're not distributing food to the foodless. We are serving people who are living with herpes and struggling with stigma. And that's what I have, like, my board now understanding. Like, I need for my board to be able to speak to this and say that sentence without any internalized stigma. Because now, I mean, to be honest, I done trimmed all the fat that would keep me from being able to do that myself. And now I get to be louder about this shit. I get to continue to have the impact day to day, the private messages, DMs. Sometimes I'll get some media coverage. Sometimes I'll get a little bit of praise that may help with exposure of something positive for positive people. But I need my board to act as an extension of this organization too. I need them to be proud of the work that we're doing. And I need to be better about checking in with them and letting them know about these behind the scenes conversations that I'm having, so that they're aware of the impact that's being had, so they can go out there and say, yeah, we serve people with herpes proudly. And when other people ask, well, what does that look like? I want them to be able to speak to the interconnectedness of sexual health and mental health, the importance of STI minimization, which is a more inclusive form of STD prevention. We need that. In advocacy, like, if you are someone who is feeling like called out right now because stigma keeps you from getting as involved as you would like to, that's okay. That's what I'm here for. Like, pour into my privilege. Whether that be being a guest on the podcast, whether that means sharing it, whether that means donating, or if that just means disclosing the potential partners and also inviting them into sexual health check-in dialogue. So that's what inspiring advocacy looks like. And it took for me to, just disconnect and get out of my ego about it, because it's like, damn, dude, like, I know how impactful this work is. Why don't other people, the people who are impacted by it, know? But it's like, come get what you need and then move on. Like, herpes is so insignificant once people get past it that I think that I just get forgotten about. And I mean, that's the reality of it. That's how it's supposed to be. I want people to come take what they need and then move on. And I know that, the metric of success, that sixth thing that the 12 most successful nonprofits in the United States do, I know that I got 5 of those, and I know that the 6th one is happening, but I don't need the praise. I don't need the money in order for it to continue to be successful. I do the most with the least. I got a laptop, I got a podcast mic, I got a website, and I got some apps. Like, that's how I do this. And I have a damn good community of people behind me who are willing to feed their energy into this. So if the donations come, yay. If the media comes, yay. But if it doesn't, I can still be consistent. I can continue to publish episodes of this podcast to serve as the support resource for people who are struggling with navigating herpes stigma. And that consistency is what it's about. So that's it. Like, that's the update. I wanted to share that. Our board now consists of Dr. Lex James Brown, Elise Myers, who we'll have the board meeting by then, so I could say this. Elise is going to get senior board member status because she's been here since day one through all of the different board members who shuffled in and out, and now we're going to have like a solid foundation. But we also have Dr. Evelyn Dacker, who is huge on stars. If you listen to episode 99 on disclosure, you'll hear about stars. You can watch her TED Talk, Dr. Evelyn Dacker Stars. Type that into YouTube. We've got Dr. Ina Park, who is the author of Strange Bedfellows, the book on STIs and stigma. We've also got Ray from Positive Results. If you've been in a women's support group, then you've got to know about Ray. And then we also have Tessa Robbins' son is another board member who's a member of the National Coalition of STD Directors, and she's also here local in Portland along with myself, Ray, and Dr. Dacker. And she's going to be supportive in helping me find and apply for grants. And then we have, drum roll please. Hold on, I got to count. Jordan. I hope that Jordan gets approved. So Jordan Donnell Jones, the podcast host of Vaginas, Vulvas, and Vibrators, or Vulvas, Vaginas, and Vibrators. And she's super involved with networking and super supportive and involved with and proud of something positive for positive people. And we need that. So wait, let me make sure I got everybody. We got Lex, Evelyn, Ray, Tessa, Elise, Jordan. There should be a seventh person. Oh my God. I am going to feel like a terrible person nope. That's it. I think I said Ina, Evelyn, Ray, Tessa, Lex. I'm so bad. I'm going to have it on the website. So after we have our board meeting, because everyone still needs to get inducted into the board. So we'll have time for that. And yeah, I'll have to link to that page of the Something Positive for Positive People website. So thank you all for listening. I really, really, really am interested in hearing what your feedback is of this episode. If this is something that does or does not belong here, let me know. I kind of just continue to guide the ship according to the feedback that I get and what it is that I feel called to speak on. So yeah, let me know what y'all think. And again, if you feel like you've gotten something out of these resources, if you got something out of this podcast episode, I'm just Courtney Brame on Cash App and Venmo, CourtneyBrame. No spaces, no hyphens, no special characters, no numbers. It's just Courtney Brame, first and last name, all one word, on Venmo and Cash App. PayPal is just paypal.com/SPFPP. Please remember that we also have a Patreon page. If you want to donate on a regular basis and don't want to think about it, you can subscribe for a monthly donation amount of your choosing. Patreon subscribers don't get anything special. I believe that these resources need to be accessible to and for everyone who is looking for them. Part of the challenge in my experience was that it took me 4.5 years to find any resources at all. It took me 4 years to find community. It took me 4 years. And then even after I started this podcast, it took me longer to start connecting with people who are doing similar advocacy work. It shouldn't be as big of a challenge as it is to find these resources. And that's why I choose to not put any paywall behind what's out there. But it does help. It supports me. When you support this organization, or if you can flip it around. If you feel like you want to support Courtney, then you can do that, but just write donation in the comments, and all of it's going to go into something positive for positive people in order to continue the advocacy and the ongoing efforts of serving our community. Till next time, stay sex positive.